Hello, my name is Rhonda Kitchens and I am your faculty librarian. I hope you're ready for me to mispronounce some words. I will tell you, there's a big one in here. I just kind of get it in my mouth and it just goes all sorts of places. But you have this video, you'll see it spelled out correctly, and hopefully you will never have to say it out loud. Or by seeing me mispronounce it so many awesome ways, you will just go, I will learn this word, I will own it, and use it every day. Because it actually could be possible. Anyway, we're talking about history research today. So I'm going to go over some things you may or may not know. What is a database? The anatomy of a database, keywords, truncation, phrase searching, and Boolean logic, also known as search strategy, primary and secondary resources, kind of exhaustively. We're even going to talk about keyword-specific history type keywords. And I'm going over the history database of recommended sources. Now, the amount of things you can find on history is frankly overwhelming and delightful. Sometimes at the same time, it can be both. So, let's look at the anatomy of a database. I just want you to know, when I use the word database, it refers to some of the resources that we have here at the library, but there's also databases on the internet, like the Library of Congress has several types, PubMed, etc. So they're all over. And you use databases every single day. If you're using Netflix, that is a database full of digital videos. Hulu, same thing. Pluto, kind of the same thing. Audible, podcast. So what makes you prefer one or the other? Sometimes there's an overlap between that, Netflix and Hulu. Is there a reason you might choose one or the other? There is in my life. I would choose Netflix every time because it seems to be more worthy. I can find a search for keywords more rapidly. I can understand where things are. And if I like something, it says, hey, would you like to see something else you may like? And I'm like, yes. So the databases are the same way. Some of them you'll put keywords and searches in, and they'll give you a list of results. Some of them will give you a list of results, kind of put them in a certain level of relevance, and then when you select one, they'll go, oh, you like this article? You may also like this article as well. I'm doing a circle thing around ProQuest. ProQuest is awesome for that. And ProQuest is one of our general databases, and I'll go into that a little bit later. Meantime, I want to show you some search tricks. Now, these are really important. When I say really important, these are the 3 I use every week. Okay? Truncation. This is how you get more out of a word. And with history, you'll see there's like different variations of so many endings. And you don't want to search them 5 different times. Search them all at one time. My example here, let's go with trauma. When you line them up, they all go trauma, trauma. So if you put the asterisk at the part where the suffix begins on those, you're going to get all 3 of these words in your search and not have to do 3 searches. I hope you're feeling that right now. This also works on Google, my friends, just in case you needed to know that. Phrase searching, invaluable, especially in history research. You're going to put a phrase in quotes. So if it's an event, American Revolution, put it in quotations, or you'll find something with American in the first paragraph and Revolution in the last paragraph. So this helps focus your work so you only get things that are about the specific thing you're looking for. Place names, people's names, all that sort of thing. Also, Boolean searching. To some degree, you're already doing it daily, but let's refine it so you think about it a little bit more using Boolean logic. The and, when you have 2 words, suppose you have employment and Washington. This is what your search should return, things that have employment and Washington. And if you're using truncation, you could do employee and drop it back and get employee, employed, employment. You feel now you can use all these beautiful things together? Yes, you can. Now, or if you have similar things. Suppose you want to look for jobs and employment as 2 words in your keywords of your search. Use or between them and you can create a string of synonyms. Instead of looking for them individually, why not search for them all at one time? Inevitably, there's going to be something that shows up in your search. You do not know why, but you can get rid of it. You could say not. My best explanation for this is when I do like a Florida plants, Plants, search, and I get nuclear plants. Do you know how I fix that search? I go not N-O-T, capitalized, not nuclear. Now, a lot of databases are already set up with drop-down boxes for you to select these, but sometimes if you're having to use them in a search string, just make sure these are capitalized to make them function in that fashion. Now, here's the word I can't say. Historiography. I want to say hystericalography, but that's not what it is. Anyway, it's really big, huge, and that's why I have this whole exploding light bulb right here. This whole exploding light bulb is about this. It is the history of the study of history. Do you feel that? And I just want to show you. And it's not just this word, and we're going to go through these over here as well. It's other words. I'm going to take you to the library catalog here. I think it's this one. Nope, it's not that one. There's my notes. I am looking for something beautiful. There it is. It's just as colorful as that. Hope you enjoyed seeing my list of Google Drive objects. So, here we go. History. Do you see how I put this here? Because guess what? It's just not one word. Historiographic, which I also cannot say. Graphy, graphical, graft. See how it highlights? So by putting this in, there were like 7,000 results before. By just putting the asterisk in, now I have so much more. A lot of these you'll see are online. So if you click on this, it will take you in so you could read this in full text. And this is really exciting. You'll see all sorts of things in here. So ideally, you would put something else that was specific to your needs. America, an event, a war, an object, and then you would narrow it down to those things. I have this set to books, but you can also, in the library catalog, look for articles. It's not my preferred way to go, but you know what? It's a great way to go. So there's my bias. When you go into the library page, I'll show you the two different things, and you'll understand kind of my bias and how that works. So let's look again at how we can use those keywords in this. When you're looking for a history of something, it's often great to use history. And we'll talk the next slides about primary and secondary sources. So this would be a search for a secondary source. If you put the asterisk here, it gets all these words. Diary, we'll look at that in a minute. Diary, diaries, letters, names of people, placed events. If you put a .gov in an internet search, in a Google search, you're going to get some historical, usually history related or other event related, possibly even archives. Archives itself is an awesome word. Other search terms you might use is digital collections, digital resources, historical society, history collections. Those are solid gold when you're doing your research in Google, because I know you will. I'm going to show you some things, but the history research on the internet is so amazing. So I promised I would talk to you about primary versus secondary sources. You'll start looking at this probably the second you hit a history class, History 101, or as you move along. You may not have had experience with this, and this is going to be very painful for you. You'll find it in your rubric or your assignment. You need 2 primary resources and 3 secondary sources. And you're looking for the magic button. And actually there is a magic button, by the way, and I'm going to show you those. So primary sources are first-hand accounts. It takes place in the time period of the event. It's diaries, it's letters, it's documents created at the time, it's oral histories. You'll see a lot of this on loc.gov. It's awesome. Original documents, archives.gov, but we have other ways to get through them through some of our databases. Hey, this is government reports. It's not government receipts, but maybe those are the same thing. So in addition to not being able to say a word, I cannot spell reports today. Property records, yes, property records are absolutely, and some newspaper articles. I will say some newspaper articles because it would be like searching for, okay, let's look at the Vietnam War. And this is also another one of the problems with keywords. If you go into the New York Times, so search for the Vietnam War in certain parts of the 60s, you're not going to find a Vietnam War. You might find a conflict, an incursion, some other words. We were being helpful. We were going in to assist or aid or whatever that might be. It may, as time goes on, only become what we see as a war. So, such as World War I was not World War I to people at the time. sometimes we give historical events different names. So when you're doing your keyword search, when you're searching the primary sources, you might find you need to find out what they call those things then. The secondary sources are going to be really good about understanding those types of things, the conflict between the keyword at the time and the keyword that it would become. But that's really true in almost everything. Keywords change, global warming, climate control, different things like that. At one time were the greenhouse effect. So when you're doing keywords or any type of research, we understand the shift in what the meanings are at the time the thing was done and changes as we learn more about it. I believe that word might be sort of historiography, but I can't say that word. Yes, you could feel free to call me and say it on my answering machine. I'd be glad to hear that. Anyway, secondary sources, they use these primary sources and other secondary sources to come up and analyze, interpret, synthesize, and evaluation. So, if you see the Declaration of Independence in its original form on archives.gov, that is a primary source. If you see somebody writing about what the Constitution means, what the Founding Fathers meant, other analysis, interpretation, synthesis, and evaluations, good, bad, and otherwise, that's a secondary source. So ideally in history, you would like to be able to touch on all these sources. And right in the middle, I put, bing, social media, because you're like, diaries? At this point, you may even be going blogs, letters, oral histories. Guess what social media can be as well? It could be a primary source. It could be a secondary source. But if the person is writing about the event at the time, suppose there's some sort of earthquake in California, they're right there like, oh, the ceiling is shifting or something like that, and hopefully they survive and everything's fine. That will be a first-hand account. Now, when the people look back and like, all these people were posting on Twitter about the ceiling shifting when they should have been running for cover. Now, that could be an analysis, interpretation, synthesis, or an evaluation. Do you see what I'm saying? All right. So we have these library databases. I cannot go into all today. I'm going to give you a taste of InfoBase, but all these do kind of the same things. They look the same way, but they cover these topics: African American history, American Indian history, ancient and medieval history, and modern world history. Now, these contain very specifically, they even have a tab that says primary sources and secondary sources and all sorts of things. Narratives, diaries, letters, the whole thing. We also have history studies in our JSTOR, which is luscious. We don't have the full JSTOR, we just have part of it, but you can get to things when you're using the full one as you move on to other colleges and universities. Like you could get things back to the 1500s. Just amazing, like handbills and posters and all sorts of things. Like, what? Yes, you can. Probably not through our edition, but again, the internet and Google is a wonderful place for history research. Biography in context is about, people, and usually it is going to be a secondary resource, but it can reach back and give you some original interviews and some things of that nature as well. We have a new women's magazine archive, and it's pretty much last century, but it's actual images from women's magazines and culture and kitchen culture and all sorts of interesting things as it was printed. Now, if you're using the PDF of the object at the time, hey, guess what you have? In many cases, and you'll have to look at case-by-case basis, you might have a primary source. And sometimes you'll have a secondary source, but it's very useful. These are our two broadest databases. If you ever get lost, these are the two map points, the compass points you need to hold to. They're cross-disciplinary. They cover everything from angels to zoology. Everything. You can find articles, you can find videos, they're multimedia. You trade magazines, scholarly articles, magazines, newspapers. Bam, they're huge and beautiful. In some cases, they do have older materials, and you do have a way that you can select what time period that it would cover. But they might be more sources for secondary, but in their references, you might find something that refers you to a primary source. So you can use your research to create your other research. Now then, this is, I'm just going to say this. this is huge. Here, the Google, we'll just call it, actually really works amazingly. You have archives.gov, you have libraryofcongress.gov, you have databases inside of databases, web pages full of different places you can search. There's a search bar on every single page. It's incredibly rich and overwhelming. And this is just when you use the .gov. You could search for a historical topic or a person or an object or thing in Google and add .gov, and it will help find you a page inside one of these or a different one entirely. As it turns out, our government, many governments, love to keep historical objects. Many have been digitized. To show you how to do research in Google for history would take us a few hours. So these are all good, and almost every page has a search bar. Use those. And also, when you're doing your research outside of the .gov, there's .orgs, there's digital collections, digital resources, historical society history collections. And if you use some of these concepts, you might be able to find tiny little places where you could write people to look up a newspaper article in a newspaper that doesn't exist anymore. They have the tiny beautiful collections of letters and diaries and all these other things. And depending on what you're working on, this effort can be extremely beautiful and engaging and intense. Take all those words and phrases in there to find your people that are working on your history project already as a calling. Because even on libraryofcongress.gov, you can actually write people and ask for help, because most of these all are connected to librarians that can help you, and they often can help you like the same day. So you're not alone when you go to these places. You can also reach out to me as well, because I know it's overwhelming. Library of Congress, I could do an hour talking about what's on that website alone. And maybe one day I will. But right now, this is what I'd like to see you, this is what I would like you to know. So I'm going to go and show you our history resources, and I'm just going to touch on a few, because it's deep, it's rich, and whatever your topic is, there might be a better way, but here we go. I am not going to assume that you know where the library is, even though this is perhaps on a library page. It could also be in Canvas. So I'm going to look for academics. I have not found love for this drop-down box yet. Library, and here I go. I would like to suggest for you to bookmark us. We have a very simple little bookmark, and you should use this periodically through the next 2 years. When I said the library catalog and you saw me looking for books, this is where I was. In a way, most of the library's resources are between these two places. The library catalog is actually very rich for history resource, because that's where the print book and the ebooks mostly are, though you can find them in different places. It's definitely the print collection. We have over 130 databases, and maybe 20% will be in the library catalog. So if you search here, you've definitely searched all of our print collection, but not all of our digital resources. Here is databases A to Z. This is a designation that just means alphabetic, A to Z, angels to zoology. Okay, you're going to see this on practically any number of databases and libraries and universities, sometimes even at your job. It's just a way of managing information. Here you have find databases by subject. This is kind of important, because if you don't know, how do you know? When you go to University of Washington or there's others, they will have 500 to 700 databases in this listing, or sources or resources, according to how they want to put them in there. We have 130, but we put them down. Now, a lot of these are really general, like Academic Search Premier. You could almost search for anything, angels to zoology, in this database. But these are the best bets. Remember I said something about InfoBase? I'm going to take you into this one. Now, we have those 5 different flavors, and medieval, ancient, modern, world history. But you're going to see immediately that this breaks things out in a very different way. This lists the primary sources, maps and charts, timelines, topics, hey, angels to zoology, videos. It has subjects, So you don't, like if you were looking for the Underground Railroad in another database like ProQuest, you'd want to put it in quotes so it searches the phrase. Guess what they did? They've already put the topic here. So in many cases your topic is covered. It also covers errors. It has featured people, slideshows, maps. You see the whole thing. And you can also search. Suppose I want to look for diaries. This is an essay on sources, so it's probably talking about it. I have up here a chance to look for the different things, and it doesn't have it here in this area. So let me just put in the word war. Sadly, it'll probably be in every one of these history pieces. So if I just want primary sources, I will come here, and this will show me plans, speeches, diaries, accounts, testimony, letters, etc. All the soup that makes up primary sources. Also, you have news, videos, and articles. So this will go back to some newspapers, and you can narrow it down by results. So if it didn't happen in 2015 and it was older, these will be secondary sources. Articles will cover a little bit of everything. As you can see by the number of search results, it's very rich. So you can use the different ways to look at things up here. Let's see if we want to do Civil War. We put it in quotes, so it just searches for Civil War, and we see it in all these titles. And these are full text. What you see is what you get. Underneath it, it gives you an idea of what it is. It's an encyclopedia, secondary source. Book chapter, secondary source. Another book chapter, and so on. And if you want to go to this part, we'll find testimonies, an article led by somebody who knew Harriet Tubman, an article on an ovation, a speech, diary entries, etc. So all these databases will have this. Let me see if I touch on this, if it does something good. If not, we'll just ignore it. Oh, so yes, if you go at the top, you will see the ones we have: modern history, ancient medieval history, American Indian history, American history, African American history. So it's a pretty complete set, and it has things broken down in a way that might be extremely helpful for you. We're going to go into History Study Center as a ProQuest database. It doesn't look modern or useful, but it actually is. It has historical documents, multimedia and journals, information resources, study units, all of this. So if we put in Civil War, I'm putting it in quotes so it searches as a phrase. It has some study units which will cover different types of Civil War that showed up. Historical documents. Many of these signs, I don't know if it's actual signs. Oh, it's from historical periodicals. You'll be able to look at that. And look at this. This seems to be indicating some English type event that occurred in those times. Now, if this was published at the time of the event, it's going to be primary. If it's somebody reflecting and including a bunch of them, that will be secondary. So it also has maps and references and things of this nature, multimedia and journals. So History Study Center is world, international, American, kind of bound together. So it could be useful for many different types of things. So you essentially know how to use the info bases. You understand how to use History Study Center. You saw how I use the library to find books and use some truncation. Let's go down here and see if there's something else that might be useful. Some of these are specialized EHRF. These are like historical and ancient type things. It says human resources. It's not human resources like getting a job. It's human resources over history, and it has images and objects and pieces from ancient to very international in scope. Let's see, another one, opposing viewpoints, if there's some sort of controversy about the topic. U.S. History Collection is down here, and we also have a War and Terrorism Collection, World History in Context, which I totally forgot to add to here, but that works like opposing viewpoints. Let's see if we go in and see if it's beautiful. Usually these have a lot of color to them. Yes, it does. And they're very easy to use. It has ideas. religions, all type of things. So if you were looking for, this does have a drop down box for world and U.S. history. If you wanted to look for Civil War, you could put it in war. And it's going to have academic journals, images, news, primary sources, videos, magazines, reference in case you need to find the background. I like to call the reference here a Wikipedia that will look great on your piece, biographies, and a case overview. So another benefit of this Galen context is what you see is what you get. Sometimes it doesn't have a lot of images in the articles immediately. They kind of look very plain, but if you go up here as well, it's going to have a citation. It's up to APA 7th edition and 8th edition MLA. The rule here is to copy and correct it using a style guide. You can always ask a librarian or the Writing Center about that piece. But this is a pretty complete package for you as well in terms of the research. So, this was a lot of stuff. And this a lot of stuff may have nothing to do with what you're working on, but hopefully it was helpful. Reach out to me, Rhonda K at bigbend.edu. I would love to help you with this project. I don't know what it is. Every time you ask me to help you teach me something. And that's what makes my job thrilling. I love to hear all of that. And if you want to teach me how to say historiography, you can laugh at me and tell me how to do it. I really don't care. It's all a learning experience. And we continuously learn every day. So this, again, is so monstrously huge. If you need something specific, reach out to me, because I only provided you with maybe a thimbleful of what is available to you. But I hope these ideas, the context, and the information helps you connect to what you need for your assignment to meet the requirements of your rubric, to make sure you do a great job. Again, thank you. Reach out to me if you need me. If you get lost, ask a librarian.